Good afternoon to all our dear friends online, and many thanks for taking up the time to today's presentation. We are very, very delighted to be able to present to you the main findings from the report we just released today on the 10 years from the Paris Agreement. And let me say right at the outset that this is joint work with colleagues Colin Puil, Lena Vist, Elisa Lanzi, and Walido Eslati, and we're all from the Environment Directorate of the OECD. So what have we done in this study? We have actually questioned four things. First, we question what is this that we have achieved with the Paris Agreement that wouldn't be possible without that? In other words, what is the added value of the Paris Agreement? We then go forward to question what hampers its implementation, where will change come from, and what policies are the most transformative to fuel this change. And let me say right at the outset that these are very, very difficult questions to answer, mainly because the actual data out there to help us are very scarce. And that is why in this study, we rely very much on the wisdom of experts. And we have recruited 70 government officials from 64 countries, 33 OECD and 31 non-OECD countries, and 178 non-government climate change experts from more than 100 institutions, predominantly research institutions, to give us their insights on those questions. So, disclaimer right off the bat, whatever you see in today's presentation is the outcome of views, is the outcome of opinions, but nevertheless, we believe that the thing we present today to you makes a unique contribution, not only because it's one of the few expert surveys that exist on climate change action, but also because it's the largest expert survey on the Paris Agreement so far, and the only one to quantify its added value. And talking about the added value, let me take you right there at the heart of the questionnaire, where we ask our experts how stringent mitigation policies are. We allow for 6 different answers that you see at the right side of the screen, all the way from strongly disagree, which means that they strongly disagree that mitigation policies are stringent, to strongly agree. And we assign a numerical number to each of them from 0% to 100% to be able to handle averages and aggregate those answers. So for example, an agreement level of 80% corresponds to an answer agree, while an agreement level of 40% will be corresponding to an answer of somewhat disagree. And so when we ask this question for the year 2000, our experts give us a 21% level of agreement that mitigation policies were stringent in the year 2000, which corresponds, as you can see on the screen, to more or less disagree. We then ask the same question for the year 2015, the year of the signature of the Paris Agreement, to see this agreement level rising to 36%. And this is the first main finding of the survey. Our experts strongly believe that there was progress even before the Paris Agreement. And now to see the effect of the Paris Agreement after that, what possibly it has caused to this trend, we have to jump to the present moment, and we have to split the analysis to 2 parts. First, in what we call factual pathway, we ask our experts, are climate change mitigation policies stringent today with the Paris Agreement, to get a level of agreement at 52%. And then, in a counterfactual pathway, we repeat the same question without the Paris Agreement. Would mitigation policies be stringent today without the Paris Agreement? To see this agreement level falling to 32%. So the difference between these two, which is approximately 20 percentage points, is what we call in the study the added value, the perceived added value of Paris Agreement. And as you can see, it is substantial, it is statistically significant, and it remains significant as we project the experiment forward and we ask our experts to tell us what they think about the year 2030 and 2040 with the same question. Now, as you can see, the contribution remains there and it slightly rises. We then go ahead and we repeat this experiment, but with a slightly different question. This time we don't ask, are mitigation policies stringent, but we ask, is climate change mitigation an international policy priority? To get very comparable results, as you can see now in the right panel of the screen, with some qualitative and quantitative differences that we analyze in the report and you may find also insightful. Then we go ahead with a third thought experiment. And here we asked our experts to imagine that Kyoto Protocol, the predecessor of the Paris Agreement, is still the main global reference to global climate action until today. And what we observe is a high level, a substantial level of agreement that in this scenario, emission reduction targets would be weaker, emission levels would be higher, mitigation policies would be less stringent. They also substantially agree that it would be more difficult to measure progress in reducing emissions. It would be more difficult to secure public support for mitigation policies. It would be more difficult to mainstream climate action within the government and within the political system, and also to have the local governments involved in climate action. In the second part of the survey, we asked our experts which economic barriers they think prevent mostly the implementation of pledges already made in the nationally determined contributions. 47% of government officials told us we need public funds to secure the green transition and these are scarce, while another 13% pointed first difficulties in mobilizing private capital. So 60% put funding issues at the top of the problem. But there is another 25% which points to specific economic problems, employment in affected areas, distributional impacts, inflation. There is only a 9% which points to the overall economic performance, which says the overall economic performance, GDP, and other macroeconomic indicators is the main barrier. And there's only a 6% that points to the competitiveness of the export-intensive sectors. Then, in a similar question about institutional barriers, 1/3 almost of the respondents told us the main barrier is vested interests that prohibit climate action. There's another 1/4 that think that it is the political discontinuity that disrupts climate policy between electoral cycles. And there is almost another 1/4 that thinks that the main barrier is coordination, horizontal and vertical within the government systems, followed by some other factors that you will also find in the report. In the question of where change will come from, we get a very, very vocal answer from our respondents, which is that the change will mainly come from traditional policy instruments, as almost 80% of our respondents point to either market-based instruments, regulations, or innovation-boosting policies as the main channels of change. And there is only a 9% who pointed to autonomous technological progress without policy support, and a 12% that pointed to behavioral interventions and voluntary change by individuals and firms as the main catalysts of change. When we take a slightly more policy-specific viewpoint, the belief that the energy sector should be the main focus of the transition is very, very strong. As you can see in the next graph, almost 3 out of 4 respondents say the main focus of the policy actions should be the electrification of various sectors of the economy, producing cleaner energy, producing energy in more efficient ways, and switching to energy-saving products. This is followed by a 10% who believe that the main focus should be cutting down consumption in general. Another 10% that believes that we should target other emissions outside the energy sector, for example, LULUCF emissions. And another 7%, which prioritizes the advancement of technologies that are currently at their infancy, for example, carbon capture and hydrogen. In the last part of the survey now, the experts told us how effective specific policy directions they think are. And so here in this graph, the more to the right a policy direction will appear, the more effective they think it is in cutting down CO2 emissions. And they also told us how much they believe we have progressed with those policies. That will be on the vertical axis. So the higher up a policy direction will appear, the more the stated progress. So what did they tell us? They told us that scaling up the amount of energy from renewables is the most transformative policy direction, followed by phasing out fossil fuels in power generation, investing in green infrastructure and in the expansion of existing carbon sinks, while on the other hand, scaling up the amount of energy from nuclears, carbon capture, and alternative fossil fuels are not only seen as the least transformative policy directions, but also as some of the least advanced ones. And then in the middle, we have a large set of other policy directions. We don't have the time to go through all of them. You can find them in the report. Some of them point to energy efficiency. Some of them point to behavioral interventions. But most importantly, there is a set of policy directions that are specific on carbon pricing. And that is what you see on blue dots here in this graph. And they turn out to be very heterogeneous. As for example, cap and trade mechanisms are seen as very transformational, while a carbon tax on consumption goods is not. Reaching the end of this short presentation, let us summarize the key takeaways from the report we released today. There is a strong expert belief that emanates from the survey that the effect of the Paris Agreement so far has been considerable, decisive, and is going to be durable. Not only do our experts believe that the Paris Agreement helped to make mitigation a policy priority, and it strengthened mitigation policies, but they also think and see that as a safeguarding mechanism. They believe that without it, the momentum we had prior to 2015 would have subsided given the international environment today. And you can find much more about this safeguarding effect in the report. They also believe, with an eye on the future, that climate action will further intensify by 2040, but not without the Paris Agreement. When it comes to what hampers implementation, limited public funding, lack of policy continuity, and vested interests emerge as 3 very consistent responses to this question. And on the question of where will change come from, we get a very vocal answer that this will be primarily policy-induced and secondarily voluntary or market-driven. And via the sectorial focus of the survey, the experts point to the energy sector as the main playfield of the energy transition. With an eye on the clock, please let me put a full stop here. The QR code to access the report is now on the screen. We hope that you will read and you will find this work insightful. If you do, please cite us. And please come back to us letting us know your thoughts. Thank you very much again. And back to you, Elisa.